shouldn't matter.
Here we are. All right, we're live.
All right, hi everyone. Welcome to the History Museum on the Square, where tonight's tasting is going to be coming to you from. Before we get started, we'll be starting just in a second here. Before we get going, we wanted to give you a little glimpse into the museum and let you see what's inside.
Hello, welcome to our third virtual wine and cheese tasting. This is a really special tasting that we have tonight. This is a partnership with the History Museum, of course, and Terrell Creek Farms. We have Leslie Million here, and we have our very special Elle Feldman from Good Clean Wine. And if you didn't know, today is the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, and that is why we are here honoring women in power. So let's get right into it. We're gonna have Darren interview Elle with our first wine, which is the Good Clean White. And if you haven't already, go ahead and take out your wine and cheese, put it down on a plate, and have fun with it. Take it away.
Hi, my name is Darren Link. I work at Brown Derby International Wine Center, and today I have a very special guest, Mrs. Elle Feldman with Good Clean Wines. I'm happy to report that I've interviewed Elle and her wine portfolio a few times now, but every time that we get together to talk about her wines, I take away something new that I didn't know before. This first wine is the Good Clean White wine.
Yes.
And what grape varietals are in this wine?
It is Trebbiano, Sauvignon Blanc, Malvasia, and Ansanica. And those are all native grapes to the area. And the region is in Maremma, Italy, in Grosseto, Tuscany, actually, right on the sea coast, on the western coast of Italy. And those native grapes grow perfectly there. And our wine is sustainably farmed and grown where there's minimal intervention because they plant these native grapes in the right soils. So they just grow easily into healthy, beautiful grapes.
Well, I've heard of three of the grape varietals. Trebbiano, of course, is also known as Uni Blanc in France, which is the primary component of cognacs. Sauvignon Blanc, of course, is the second most popular grape varietal. Malvasia shows up in several places in Italy and also in Spain.
Yes.
But Ansanica, that's the one that I'm not familiar with.
I had never heard of it either, and I'm not really sure I've seen it. I think I may have seen it on one other blend that I've had before, maybe in Italy or Spain, I'm not sure. So I personally, this is the first or second time I've heard of it.
So this is a wine that's usually used as a blending component rather than
I've not seen it as a
standalone grape varietal.
Yeah, and Trebbiano is quite typically used as a varietal alone.
Yes, it is. Yeah, I've seen examples of that in Sauvignon Blanc and Malvasia also.
Yeah, right.
So tell the folks out there, how did you get into the business?
Well, actually, it started, I've been a wine enthusiast and lover and drinker since I turned 21, so over 20 years. And my main career is I'm an esthetician and I own a day spa and I specialize in skincare. And typically people think wine is not good for your skin as it's dehydrating and will not aid into your glowing, juicy skin lifestyle. But I do incorporate wine into what I call as the good skin lifestyle. But we have found, I had developed allergies to things in wine, didn't really know why. And when I started drinking wines from all over the world, I stumbled upon wines made sustainably, organic, biodynamic, minimal intervention, and those wines I didn't seem to have reactions to, and I didn't have reactions in my skin. So people who are concerned about their skin don't want to drink wines that will make their skin red or give them a rash or give them congestion or make them feel bad. And if you choose clean wines, which is a broad term we use because most people understand what clean food or clean beauty means. And our wine clean, meaning sustainably grown, minimal intervention, is right in the middle of a spectrum of zero intervention wines that most people refer to as natural or raw or skin contact or orange wines. And we're like, nothing is done to the wine. It's just, you could maybe talk more about that, to the extreme spectrum of mass-produced wines where there actually are synthetic ingredients added to wine to make it taste and look a certain way.
So you kind of created Good Clean Wines just for yourself, but also to share with your friends and
Well,
clients.
actually, it was for our clients, not just for ourselves, because I personally had access to clean wine, especially, this is how I know Darren, is he's been part of my wine journey at least for 15 years, and helping educate me as I've shopped at Brown Derby as a customer, and he's been one of the people that's helped educate me about wine in general, and led me to clean wines. So
Sure.
I was able to buy what I call clean wines at the Derby with your help.
Sure. Yeah, I can recall you coming into the store and you're like, is this going to make me break out? Is this going to give me a hangover?
Yeah.
And we had to find very specific wines.
Right.
And it was trial and error, but we came up with a core group of wines
Yeah.
that suited your needs
Yeah.
and what you needed them to do for you.
Yeah, and
or
so
not do.
we would serve those wines at our skincare parties, and I would call Darren and say, I'm looking for something in this price range that's clean, you know what I like, you know what my standards are, we'd like a sparkling rosé, and we would order those and serve them just complimentary at our skincare events. And people started asking us more questions about the wine than the skincare, and we spent more time talking about wine than skincare and not being a wine expert, you know. And then Darren would let me know that our clients, they're like, where can you get this wine? And we're like, the Brown Derby, and they would go there and buy the wine.
Oh, we were selling the most esoteric wines you could possibly imagine, and these ladies would come in and ask for just the strangest things, and it's like, and they're like, well, L. Feldman served these at Good Skin Day. I'm like, oh, and then we would have to bump up production or
Yeah.
availability of very specific wines based on you selling them for
Yeah.
us. So
Yes, and then we decided that it would be, is it possible to create our own brand of wine and import it, to find and source wine that fit our standards for our good skin lifestyle and create our own brand and market it to the people that are also interested in the good skin lifestyle and our skincare.
sure.
To be another one on your shelf, which it is, which
It is.
a dream, and it's amazing.
Yeah, so all of these wines are available at Brown Derby. The first wine we are having is the Good Clean White. And I haven't actually, well, I've taken one sip of the wine, but I
Yeah.
have only one. So I hope you're enjoying the wine out there. I'm going to just take a little sip here. What I find amazing in this one is the Sauvignon Blanc really does peak its head out there.
Yeah.
But it's not primarily Sauvignon Blanc.
Right. Well, Trebbiano is the predominant grape primarily. And what I like about it too, Sauvignon Blanc happens to be probably one of my most favorite grapes. But what you'll find, because of where this is planted in Tuscany, in Maremma, in that appellation, the soil is the sea. I mean, it's really the sea that is the soil there. And but you're not going to get what you think you're going to get from a New Zealand or a Sancerre. It's a very different taste. And I feel like because this is only fermented in steel tanks and it is a different terroir than the other two traditional Sauvignon Blancs, I feel like you just taste Sauvignon Blanc,
Sure.
just the grape, you know?
Yep,
Yeah.
without any of the other things.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what would you pair this wine with? I already have a few ideas
Yeah.
on my own, but
Well, I hope this is perfect for what we're doing today because Chèvre, obviously. And I've spent some time in Sancerre and we call it Croton de Chèvignols, and it really doesn't get better than this. I mean, with the crostinis and the Chèvre and this, it's a meal for me, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It can be an aperitif. A lot of times I can eat, cheese and wine as a meal, and if you serve cheese and wine as your aperitif or something before dinner, it can sometimes squash the meal, but this one will not. If you serve this wine with the Chèvre, it actually stimulates the appetite instead of squashes it, and it can be your first course if you want to do a coursed meal, and then it's also beautiful as a dessert cheese court, which is my favorite thing for dessert, actually, is to not have dessert, is to have
But
cheese
have
and wine.
cheeses instead.
Uh-huh.
And rather than being complimentary, saying that we're pairing acid with acid, the cheeses have a certain amount of fattiness to them. So what we're doing is contradicting flavors, and that's what makes cheese and wine taste so well together. Because you've got the wine, which is high in acid, and the cheese, which is high in fat. So every time you have a bite of cheese and then take a sip of wine, not only is it going to change the taste of the wine, but the wine will also clear your palate. And the next time you have a bite of cheese, it's going to be fresh and new again, which I think is fascinating.
Right, and it cuts the feeling of the oily, creamy cheese. It cleanses your mouth.
It cleanses your mouth perfectly.
Yeah.
So in a little bit, we are going to be talking about some of the cheeses that we're serving today. But prior to that, we were going to do a toast in honor of why we are all here today, celebrating the 19th Amendment to the Constitution.
All right, so as we've been talking about, we have the History Museum on the Square has a temporary exhibit from the Smithsonian Institution that talks all about women's suffrage. It's called Votes for Women, A Portrait of Persistence. And in this exhibit, you see a little bit of it behind you. We have a national picture of women's suffrage, and we've added a component of local women from Southwest Missouri, that helped in the fight to gain women's votes. So we are going to be toasting a few of these women tonight. The first one is Sarah Broadstreet. So Sarah Broadstreet is an interesting woman, a local woman who not only campaigned for the vote, she was able to actually vote in the first election that women could participate in. That was in 1920. And she is just a really strong, independent woman. She actually lost her husband. He died in the 1930s. And she did something that women didn't really do back then. She continued to be a single mother and worked to provide for her family. She was also an avid writer. She wrote poems and articles and even a book. So we are going to raise our glass to Sarah Broadstreet right now.
To Sarah.
To Sarah.
Sarah,
Cheers.
Are we allowed to touch?
I'm not sure what's safe anymore.
Amazing.
We cup to elbow.
Yummy.
Thank
So-
you so much, Katie.
I'm really interested about the first cheese, Richard.
Yes.
Yes. So our first cheese is Chev. And Chev is a fresh goat cheese. And a lot of people in the Ozarks, their favorite fresh goat cheese is from Terrell Creek, of course. And to me, it really stands out because it tastes a lot cleaner than a lot of these mass-produced goat cheeses like Montchev or Best Value. So can you tell me a little bit why that might be?
Sure. First of all, we're a very small creamery. We milk a maximum of 50 goats, and everything that we do is small batch, handmade. So if you go to the store and you're buying, one of the big commercial Chevs, they're pooling milk from thousands of goats sometimes. They also have very large equipment, big industrial pumps. Goat's milk is a very delicate milk. It'll start to break down easily and quickly if you don't handle it very carefully and cool it down really quickly. We have the ability to do that because of the size of our production, because it's so small, whereas the big commercial production facilities have the pumps that'll just beat it to death.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's that. Also, being here in the Ozarks, our goats are fed almost exclusively on just our farm. We have 50 acres. They have browse full-time. Even in the winter, they have access to dried leaves and stuff. And I think that taste comes across also, just like with with wine, you know, it comes across in what the goats eat in the cheese.
That's awesome. Yeah. And her farm is in Fordland, if you didn't know already. It's a very beautiful landscape. I absolutely love that house. We're really missing cheese night at the farm this year because of the pandemic, but we're bringing it straight to your living room with this tasting. So can you tell us a little bit why you started this business? What really inspired you to get a bunch of goats and start making cheese?
Yeah, so it's been a whole journey, actually. My husband and I began, gosh, I don't know, pretty shortly after we got married, trying to be more self-sufficient. He had spent time on his grandparents' farm. I grew up on a farm, and we just wanted to be able to produce our own food is kind of how it started. So I got interested in making cheese. I had wanted goats since I was 3 years old, and had not been allowed to have goats as a child.
Oh no.
So it was kind of a combination of that, wanting to have goats. I've always been a foodie and loved good food and good cheese.
And you make really, really good cheese.
Well, thank you.
We all really
Thank
love
you.
your cheese.
Thank you. I mean, it's trial and error. You
Right.
have to learn as you go. But-
And we do sell quite a few different flavors of the fresh chev at the Brown Derby, but there are other flavors that we don't sell year round. I know that you have a cranberry one that will come out during the holidays.
Yes.
What other flavors do you have? I know you have a chocolate chip.
We do.
Uh-huh.
We do. We have the two sweet ones that we do. Well, actually, there's three. We do the chocolate chip. We do a cranberry pecan, and then we do a pumpkin walnut, which is just seasonal. As far as savory, we do an Italian herb and garlic, fire roasted jalapeno, a bacon and chive, and a horseradish, which is seasonal also.
That's awesome.
And we had never planned on doing different flavors of the chev. It just kind of happened because when we first started 9 years ago, people would say, okay, that's really good, but what do I do with it? And so we started doing the flavor combinations, the flavors, just to show people how versatile chev really is. And we had so many customers that would say, well, just make that for us, please.
Yeah, because really you can just take this fresh chev, this plain fresh chev, and mix it with just about anything that you really want.
Yeah, it really is very versatile.
I had the Terrell Creek Shove with a pizza on Saturday. And I found some fresh figs and tried that with some prosciutto and the chev as opposed to mozzarella, and the pizza was fantastic.
And it is a little bit more gentle for our lactose intolerant friends, because cow's milk is a lot more abrasive on the system than goat's milk, as we know. So
That is true. That is true.
yeah, so if you have anyone that's like, oh, I can't do cheese, I'm lactose intolerant, well, cheese actually is lactose free because those enzymes and those bacteria are actually eating on that lactose.
Yes, and a lot of it washes away in the whey also
Wow,
during
that's
the process.
awesome. So how many goats do you have, or have you had on your farm maximum?
Maximum, we had 80.
80 goats.
80 goats, yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
and that was your biggest, the biggest haul of goats that you had.
Yep.
And there are other places in the country that have thousands. So that just really goes to show how small this might be, even though it might be on how many acres?
We have 50 acres.
50 acres.
Yeah, we have 50 acres.
That's awesome. That's truly amazing. Well, this fresh goat cheese pairs perfectly, coincidentally, with this Sauvignon Blanc. And one of my favorite things that I like to throw in with a Sauvignon Blanc and chev pairing is fresh rosemary. This aromatic doubles as a garnish. It's very beautiful on the plate, but mixing it in, smelling it with the wine, and tasting it with the cheese just really puts the cherry on top of this pairing.
I need to try this.
I know.
Now, excuse us, we're gonna taste a little bit. Please feel free to taste along in your homes. So what is one of...
Goat cheese and rosemary.
I know I'm asking this as soon as you put a bite in your mouth. So this has been my go-to pairing. Before Elle came out with her wine, I would search out French or Italian Sauvignon Blancs with this fresh shove. Can you tell us about what your favorite pairing is with your fresh shove?
Well, I think this is a great pairing. Usually as far as wines, I will go for a Sauvignon Blanc every time. One of my favorite things to do with the shove is to put it on a pizza or to stuff figs with it.
Squash blossoms.
Yes, I've done squash blossoms.
I just put
very
it on
labor
pasta,
intensive.
throw in some pesto, and it just melts in the warm pasta.
Yeah.
It's
And you
like
just got a
fake, it's like
sauce.
imitation Alfredo, but way better.
Yeah.
For you?
Yeah.
Yeah, much
Yeah.
better for you.
Yeah.
And that's what we're all about right now.
Yeah.
Cooking and eating, yes.
Yes.
Cooking and eating, yeah. What other questions do I have for you? What does the cheese making process look like with shove? Because I know some people might think that shove is the cream cheese version with goat's milk, but I don't think that's actually true.
It's not. So to make shove, you basically you're going to culture your milk, and this is a lactic acid type cheese. So the lactic acid that's in the milk already does a lot of the work for you. It's basically you culture it, you let it ripen for 20 to 24 hours. Then it is scooped into draining bags and hung up for about another 20 hours to drain. And at that point you can take it down, you add salt to it. That will stop that lactic acid process so it doesn't get, too far. Also adds flavor, and then you can add whatever you want to it or use it however you like. So it's a pretty simple process.
Yeah. So
One of the easier cheeses.
From milking to finished product, it takes about 2 or 3 days. 2 days.
Yeah, 2 days.
Very quick turnaround.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And that's one of the reasons that we started with the shove, because, it's so quick and easy to put it into production and get it out there.
Yeah. Gets so delicious. So very delicious. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Now I believe we are going to go into our second wine, which is the Good Clean Spumante.
Ooh.
Take it away, guys.
Okay, so sparkling wines are my personal favorite. For those of you that know me, sparkling wines really are my personal favorite. This wine is also an unusual blend of white wine grapes. Pignoletto, Sobara, and Salamino.
Yep.
Can you tell me anything about those grapes? Because those are probably grapes that no one is familiar with.
They are native grapes from Emilia-Romagna in the area of, it's near Bologna in Italy, but it's the appellation of Emilia-Romagna. More specifically, this one's in Emilia-Romagna, and Carpi is the town where the wine is made, where the winery is at. But these are just native grapes that are native to the area, that if you're from that area, you would be very familiar with them. This is the area that is famous in Italy for, they call it the land of sparkling wine and tortellini. And actually, Emilia and Romagna used to be separate, and now they're together as one province. And I had not been familiar with them either, and I think I've heard of Pignoletto, and I've seen that before.
Sure.
And I think that can be in a still wine sometimes, maybe.
Sure, yes, it can be.
Yeah.
So I've got a mental picture of the boot, which is Italy.
Yeah, Italy.
So where is Emilia-Romagna on the boot?
Okay, so Bologna is a little bit south of Venice, and so it's like north of Tuscany, near Lake Como.
Okay.
And so it's a little bit like middle, but a little bit more north to the east coast, but not as east as Venice, not as north as Venice.
Okay, so it would be kind of like where you're putting your foot into the boot.
Yeah.
A pretty neat part
But
of
right
it.
by Lake Como, Bologna there and Lake Como.
Okay, so this wine sees no oak aging at all.
No,
It's all stainless steel, and it's made in a pretty interesting way to make sparkling wine.
Sure.
It's not made in method traditional, which is the way that you would typically make champagne, but it's made in something called the Charmet method.
Right.
Could you tell us a little bit about the Charmet method?
Yeah, so it's a stainless tank, and it's actually, they like to, even though it's the Charmat method, that's, they like to call it in Italy the autoclave closed fermentation.
Sure.
And the reason they say that is because an Italian actually developed that, and then a French person with the last name of Charmat added some things to it and modified it and then repatented as the Charmat. So the Italians are very proud of calling it the closed autoclave fermentation method, the tank method. And what they, it's just a two-step fermentation process where champagne is a three-step. So this one does not have a third step in the bottle.
Sure.
The two-step process is in the tank to create the bubbles. And sometimes when you have this process, you need to add sugar to cause the fermentation, to create the bubbles.
Sure.
And we're not adding sugar in the sense of sugar or fructose. There are synthetic yeasts and sugars that can be added to cause this to happen. But our, what we're adding is the yeast and the sugar, the juice basically, that is the fresh grape juice that is derived right on site at pressing. So when they bring the grapes, they hand harvest them and then bring them to the winery, and they press everything and they take away some of the yeasts and juices and hold them for a second, for a minute, and then they put the juice into the tank and it starts to ferment, and then they add this juice that we took away and we add it back in, and that's the sugary part. That's not really sugar, it's just residual sugar like you would get derived from any fruit. And then they have it closed in a tank, and they use different temperatures to cause the fermentation, but the fermentation is really just from those native yeasts and juice.
Sure. So I'll go through scientifically
Yes.
what the Charmet method is.
Yeah.
All of the grape juice is, or all of the fermentation takes place in a closed environment or a closed tank. Within that tank, what's happening is the sugars in the grapes are being converted into alcohol. The byproduct of that is CO2, or carbon dioxide, which is essentially what causes the bubbles in the wine. So what they do is they stop the fermentation by lowering the temperature in the tank, and that kills off the yeasts. And then they'll take all that wine with the bubbles in it, or that CO2 that wasn't allowed to escape, and they put it directly into the bottle. So you usually get a nice fine bubble, but it's a little bit different than champagne.
Right.
This method is also used for the making of Moscato d'Asti, but this one isn't quite as sweet as a Moscato. There might be just a little titch of residual sugar.
Right,
I
because
tasted
there's
the wine.
no actual added sugars for sweetness.
Sure.
It is residual, right?
Yeah,
so
but
there's less than 0.5 grams of residual sugar.
Sure, so that sugar is coming from the grapes not fully fermenting. You get a little sugar, and you also get a little bit lower of an alcohol level. So this wine would be perfect for a summer afternoon,
Yeah.
kind of like tonight.
Right, and this is brut, which means dry, so this is not sweet at all, but it's not a zero brut natural, you know, it has a little bit of residual sugar.
I love
It's
how
nice.
it smells so much sweeter
It's
than it
perfumey,
tastes.
yeah.
It smells like sweet yellow apples, but whenever you
Yes.
taste it, that you don't get this overly sweet
Yeah,
taste.
floral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, lots of floral.
Blossoms like, white, peach, and yellow, and green apple, which is why it goes perfectly with the cheese that you've chosen today. But yes, the fine bubbles you can see, this comes from the land of Lambrusco and Spumante. We call it Spumante because that's the name they call their sparkling wine in this region. And Frizzante also comes from this region and made from Lambrusco grapes, and Frizzante means half bubbles, and this is just really their translation for tiny little bubbles. So when you smell it and bring it up, it's not like other sparkling wines where you can kind of feel it and it's very strong. This one is such an easy drinker.
Oh, yeah.
And like we were talking about too, people ask me sometimes like, oh, is it not cool to put ice in your wine? You know, however you want to drink your wine, you should drink it. At whatever temperature you want to drink it.
It is so subjective,
Yeah.
and go with your gut feeling.
The best way to drink wine is the way you like it and want to drink it. But I will tell you, when it's hot right now, I am drinking this on ice and I love it.
Yeah, personally, when I'm drinking champagne, I like my first glass to be ice cold. The colder, the better. But I also usually take the bottle out of the refrigerator, or if I'm using a wine chiller, I'll remove it from there and I let the bottle warm up. And by the end of the bottle, I'm drinking a wine that's not nearly as chilled as the first glass. And I like it both ways, but I always like to start with it chilled.
Yeah,
I think that's how it's best.
yeah.
Sparkling wine is usually a pretty versatile
Yes.
bottle of wine, so you can really drink wines like this from the very beginning of your evening, like if you're having charcuterie and cheese and crackers and fruit, all the way through dessert. It stands up quite well with even heavy proteins like beef and lamb for an entree.
Right, and even fried foods, it's very popular to have spumante and
Yummy.
Emilia Romagna with fried things like fried chicken and potato chips and fried crackers and fried breads and French fries. That's the way that I like to have it. And, you know, we believe at Good Clean Wine that sparkling wine is for everyday celebration, every day, and the price point for this wine allows you to have it every day or on a Tuesday, and it's a great thing if you can't afford one of the higher priced, you know, champagnes that are very famous, is to look for something like this for your everyday or celebration or special occasion.
Sure, yeah, and historically in the United States, we usually use sparkling wines for celebration, like the 19th Amendment, and what we're celebrating here tonight. But there has been a growing trend in the United States where people are beginning to drink sparkling wines, not just from Thanksgiving through New Year's, but all year round.
That's a good point. I feel like I used to start drinking it on Thanksgiving through New Year's, and yes, I drink it all year long. And one thing this wine is great in is spritz. So I'm a huge Aperol spritz fan, or any kind of spritz. You can just add some club soda, add some fruit, and go for it,
Do you still have recipes for your spritz
I do,
available
yeah.
on your website?
Yeah, well, actually, you just message me on Instagram or email, and yes, we have a list of spritzes, and we have them posted on our Instagram as well.
On Instagram,
there's
okay.
one I just posted yesterday. There's a few on there. There's a balsamic spritz that we made with
Oh, wow.
balsamic vinegar from Modena and strawberry puree. So a lot of fun things to do in the summer with fresh things. I mean, I haven't tried one with cheese yet, but maybe I'll.
Yeah.
Spritz. Why not?
And then you could do some balsamic reduction over the dude or any of the other cheeses, and it can be
Yeah.
a full balsamic
Yeah.
pairing.
Yeah, but we do have spritz recipes we can share with you.
Yeah, follow Good Clean Wine on Instagram, and they're all there. That's all she does.
You can drink spritz.
So, would you? I already know the answer to the question, but would you serve this wine with dessert?
Yes.
Yes. Is there anything in particular? You mentioned strawberries and balsamic, which is a very
Yeah.
classic Italian dessert.
Yeah.
And you're making it as a spritz, which just
Yeah.
kind of blew my mind. I'm going to
Yeah.
have to get that recipe
Yeah,
before
yeah.
the end of the night. But what kind of desserts would you pair this wine with?
You know what's really fun is, and I've learned this from some restaurants I've been to in Europe, some sorbet, just get some sorbet, put a little ball of sorbet in a dish and just pour some sparkling wine on it.
Oh, yum.
And you could garnish it with mint or rosemary or anything. That can be a palate cleanser in between courses, but it can also be dessert. I just really feel like you could take fruit and just pour it on there in a little dish.
I have a friend who's making local sorbet that is
Yes.
absolutely wonderful.
Yeah. Another thing is if you freeze grapes and put them in the freezer, then put them in a dish and then pour your sparkling over it.
So
I just want to run and do it right now. That sounds so good.
we are encouraging questions, and we are monitoring questions that are being broadcast on Facebook Live. And Krista Adams, thank you for tuning in tonight. We appreciate it very much. And she just asked me to have Elle and come up with a perfume that smells like spumante. And I didn't know you were making perfume.
I don't make
You're going to have to
Yeah.
find some time in your busy schedule.
Well, I love creative tasks, and sure, I'll figure out an essential oil blend too.
So Richard, and actually it was more Richard than any of us, chose our guests tonight based on them being women from the Ozarks that own their own businesses. Both Leslie and Elle are women business owners from here, and we thought that was appropriate for the celebration of the 19th Amendment, which is the right for women to vote, which I think is very, very important.
And that is a great segue for us to go to our second toast for
Awesome.
the women that fought for the right to vote.
And we have sparkling for this one.
Yes, we do. It's
Very
appropriate.
appropriate. All right, so this second toast is going to be for Beatrice Curtis. She was from Southwest Missouri and a dedicated educator and suffragist. So she's from this area, and she ends up going to college at Howard University in Washington, D.C. at a really interesting time. While she was there, she was able to participate in the first March for Women, the first women's suffrage parade in D.C., which was actually the first march on Washington, which is amazing. So she was able to participate in the parade, but as an African-American woman, she and her fellow classmates had to march at the back of the parade. So we want to honor her for her courage and dedication and groundbreaking efforts. So to Beatrice.
Cheers.
To Beatrice.
Cheers, Beatrice. Truly
that's
amazing.
yummy.
Marching from the back of the line, and now she's at the front of our toast. Thank you, Beatrice. So that brings us into our second cheese, the Dude. The Dude is a soft ripened goat milk cheese. I know that they're Montchev, another goat cheese maker. They have a soft ripened goat cheese that they call a goat milk brie, but I know that isn't exactly accurate and it's not entirely appropriate, but it works for the American market. So can you tell us a little bit about what makes this a soft ripened cheese and why it isn't a brie?
Sure, I can answer that question. So, obviously, this is a bloomy rind, a mold ripened, white mold ripened cheese. If you know anything about bloomy rinds, the white mold will tend to make the interior of the cheese get very runny. That's why when you see a brie, it'll be a double or a triple cream, because that added cream actually slows down that process of breaking down the paste or the interior of the cheese. You can do that in 3 different ways. With a brie, they will add extra cream. You can also do it by changing up the cultures that you inoculate the cheese with. You can add more thermophilic or heat-loving cultures in relation to mesophilic or the colder temperature cultures, which is typically used for this type of cheese. And then a third way you can do that is you can lower the acidity by washing the curd. And that's what we do here with the Dude.
Amazing.
We pull
Okay.
out 25% of the way during the making process, and we add water of the same temperature, and that lowers the acidity. So you get a little firmer texture in the cheese, and like I said, it lowers the acidity, so it slows down that process of the white mold breaking down.
Right, so when you cut into it, it's not just gonna spill all over your
Right,
plate.
right.
Because I have had some goat bries that I cut into it and it's just taking over the entire plate, and it's all of this like white gooey mess. But
Exactly.
in Humboldt Fog, for instance, whenever I cut that open and I let that
Yes.
come into room temperature, I can see the center of it that is unripened, but everything in between the center and the rind, once it gets up to room temperature, just spills out. But that
Yep.
doesn't happen with
Right.
the dude.
And the Humboldt Fog, they do that by adding the thermophilic culture, is what they do. And it's not quite as shelf stable.
Yeah.
Speaking of the
As
rind,
this
is the rind in this cheese edible
It is.
Okay.
It is absolutely edible. Yes.
and delicious?
Very delicious.
I think it is.
Yet sometimes whenever you get a brie, the rind can kind of taste bitter, but with so many of my favorite ones, they're not bitter at all. They just really taste like the rest of the cheese. Can you tell me why that might be sometimes?
It has to do with the actual mold that you use, the white mold that you use, the Penicillium candidum. There are different blends, and some of them are more aggressive and they give a little stronger flavor than others. The blend that we use is kind of a medium.
Yeah.
It's not quite as aggressive. When I first started making bloomy rinds, I had that experience of having them just go liquid
Yeah.
in the middle, which
Wow.
they taste good. You know, they still taste good. They're a little stronger.
Yeah, just
but,
a little messy on the plate.
But if you're trying to sell them, you know, the shelf life is 2 weeks max, and they wouldn't hold up in your cheese case, obviously. So
Yeah, it might
we
be
started
a little
playing
messy.
around with different methods of stabilizing the paste. And actually, this was a cheese that I developed in-house, you know, in our little creamery with a friend of mine who was an apprentice at the time, and we were playing around with, you know, making something that would be more shelf-stable but still have a good flavor. And
So-
the dude was born.
Yeah, who is the dude in your world? Because I know a lot of us might think it might be from The Big Lebowski.
It is from the Big Lebowski.
It is from The Big Lebowski.
Yes, it absolutely is. So my apprentice at the time, she lived with us for a year. She's gone off to her own cheese world in Maine. But when we were working on developing this cheese and talking about a name for it, she and I were drinking White Russians at the time. And she's like, well, how about we call it the White Russian? I'm like, I don't think we should do that. And she's like, well, how about the dude? So some people will get the reference, some people won't. So.
Leslie, we had a question from one of the viewers, and their question is, what is the difference between the dude and the chev?
Oh, it has to do with the process. So all cheese, anything, there are just a few different things that will make one cheese different from the other. Obviously, you start with milk, and the type of culture that you use, whether or not you use rennet, the temperature, the time, and whether or not you press it. Those are the only things that are going to change the milk from one cheese to the other. So the chev, as we talked about earlier, you add your cultures, which are just a couple of very simple cultures. It doesn't have rennet in it. And then you hang it. And then the dude has the white mold added, obviously. The cultures that are added to it are different. It does have rennet. And then it's put in forms as opposed to bags to hang. So that
How-
changes the texture and everything of it.
How long does it take to age the dude?
It takes about a week to a week and a half. Yeah.
Yeah, because so the longer that you age it, the more it ripens.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And I don't know if any of you have ever tried this, but if you've baked a brie, you can do this with a dude too.
Yeah,
I mean,
it
you'll
won't
get the
spill out
very
everywhere.
I was actually going to
Yep.
suggest that as a perfect way to pair with this spumante, because a crescent wrapped baked brie
Yep.
Usually I would eat it with like apple slices, but you could do that, but also just this.
Yeah.
The appley taste of this
Yeah.
would go gorgeous.
And
with
when
that.
you bake it and you heat it up, it does get a little runny and creamy, and it also intensifies the flavor.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're at home and you don't want to finish all of your dude, that's perfectly fine. Just save it for the crescent rolls and
Yeah.
bake them up.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And you can add anything. You can add a blueberry jam. You can add fig preserves.
My
The
favorite.
world is your oyster whenever it comes to baked brie. Whatever flavor you like. If you like onions, even just chop them up and put them up in
So
there.
it could be savory or sweet.
One of
like
my
anything.
one of my favorite things to do is to make like a grilled cheese sandwich with caramelized onions and fig jam.
Yes, yes.
It's
and then
really good.
little pieces of the dude. And
Why
then
aren't we
it's-
making that at the Derby
And then-
Deli?
And then you should have this one.
And then
Yeah,
I do
you should have a
actually
good clean
definitely.
wine.
How long could you age the dude for? Like, you sell it the way that you've aged it now, but could you age it even further? I
You
just
can.
know that from Sancerre that they have like, they go all the way to 3-month aged, I think, you know? So can you, it just gets more firm?
It will get firmer. It'll kind of shrink a little
Yeah,
bit
yeah.
as it loses moisture content, and the
And it's
flavor
safe to
will
eat?
get a little bit
Yeah.
stronger. Yeah. We actually have a customer who will buy the dude or another bloomy rind. We do Chimney Rock, and he's kept them in his refrigerator for up to a year and eaten
Wow.
them.
Wow.
Because he likes the more intense flavor.
And I do like that as well, like the Croton de Chavendel. So I think I'm going to buy some and do that. I'm going to just age it in my fridge.
Yes.
We'll just trade for wine.
Yeah, there we go. Making connections left and right. All right, I have a few questions. So, what is your favorite pairing with the dude?
Oh, as far as wine, I definitely would go with a spumante, a sparkling type
sparkling
wine.
wine.
Yeah, yeah. With food, like I said, I love the caramelized onions and the fig jam and
Perfect.
baking it. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So we're bringing this pairing. These ladies have both said that their favorite pairing with their products are each other's products.
Yes.
So we just brought that right to you guys so we can just share this all together. But I have one question that I have been itching to ask you. What is your dream cheese? If you could make any cheese under the sun, because there's almost millions of different kinds of cheeses out there.
There are a lot
Elle
of
would
different
know,
cheeses. Yeah.
especially more than any of us, probably.
I love a cheese cart. When they roll that out, oh my God. Just lay me on it.
Just game over.
So I love all kinds of cheeses. Humboldt Fog is one of my favorites. But I have to say that a real creamy blue cheese with a pretty strong flavor is one of my very favorites, and one that I'd really like to master. Yeah.
So you guys better keep your eyes peeled. One of these days, she will come out with a creamy blue cheese, hopefully. Fingers crossed. That's amazing. So please let us know if you guys have any questions whatsoever while we have these wonderful, awesome women with us here this evening. I am very honored to have both of you here, especially in this museum. It's beautiful in here. In your tasting kit, you will get $3 off your next visit to the History Museum. So please, please, please do not let that go to waste and come and experience this amazing exhibit. There are some very pretty white gowns that I'm looking at behind the camera that you guys will have to come in here and check out. Yeah, without the suffragists, I don't know where we would be today.
Richard, there was a question that came through
Yeah.
that I think you're probably the best person to answer. What meats would you pair with cheeses? You put these boards together all the time.
Yeah, I do. I love doing prosciutto di Parma or Serrano Spanish ham. Those are two dry-cured hams, and we have both of them there at the Brown Derby Wine Center. Both of them are name controlled, so they are the authentic versions of the hams. And I just come up to the counter and ask me for either prosciutto di Parma or Serrano Spanish hams. I love pairing those hams with a lot of different cheeses, but particularly cheeses that don't have any added flavoring, that just have, you know, the basic ingredients of the cheese, because they're so buttery and they have their own amazing flavor without having to add any extra smoke or spices or herbs. So I really love prosciutto di Parma and Serrano Spanish ham as pairing with these two cheeses in particular, because those flavors just really melt in your mouth and would go along really beautifully with what we have going on here. Yeah. Do we have any other questions at all? I feel like it might be a good time to cheers to the women again, Miss Sarah and Beatrice, who fought for the right to vote. Thank you. There are obviously a lot of other great, powerful women that fought for the suffragist movement. So cheers.
Cheers. Cheers.
Thank you all for joining us at your homes. We hope that we will be doing this again sometime soon, so just keep your eyes peeled. And yeah, do you have anything else to add at all, guys?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Leslie, from Terrell Creek, and thank you, Elle, from Good Clean Wines, for joining us today. You made my job a whole lot easier.
Thank you for having us.
And we
enjoyed it.
appreciate
Yeah.
the History Museum on the Square for
Yes.
letting us use their venue for the third installment of, I guess, our
virtual-
brainchild, which
yeah.
is our virtual tastings of wine and
Great
cheese.
idea.
Is there anyone else that we need to thank? The
Thank
folks
you
out
guys.
there.
Yeah.
Thank you
With
very
our
much for tuning in.
audience.
And do try to make it here while the exhibit is up. Or if you've never been here before, you really need to see this space. It is truly amazing. It's a gym in Springfield.
And just to chime in on that, the exhibit is temporary, like we said. It's here until September 27th. So come on out, check it out. We're open Wednesday through Sunday.
Very good.
Thank you guys. Please, please, please use your little insert that we have. There's also 10% off your next online Brown Derby purchase. So just be sure to hang on to those and come into the wine center and ask Darren and I any questions that you have about cheese or wine. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Cheers.